rigor is important and structure is important because we want them to grow into the children that they want it, that they have as many things open to them as they can be. On the other side, if you do that in a way that makes them hate it, I always say, like, if my kid can do math but hates it, I still failed, right? If they hate learning, if you teach them, if they can read but they hate reading, they can do math but they hate it. If they know, the presidents of the 50, all the presidents of the United States, but don't care to ever learn about history ever again, we failed. So if you take it too far, if you shove it down their throats, you create adults who have no interest in learning at all and will stay stagnant for the rest of their lives.
Both wearing black? You
I
think it's
know. We did
raining?
the whole thing. We did the whole
That's
thing.
crazy. I'm so glad to be talking to you, though.
I'm so glad to be here and
After all
get
this
to know you
time.
better. And yeah.
So did you have a good day homeschooling those beautiful children of yours?
I did. Well, so we had an unusual day, actually. We went to the dentist instead of homeschooling today, so the kids got a little bit of free time, which was nice. And we're in that, the spring is hard for everyone, it seems. You've been doing school for a really long time, and I didn't really expect to have the same sort of thing with my kids, but we have, because they do all these extracurricular kinds of activities, like things just ramp up this season, and it's just like there's just no time for downtime, and the kids need downtime.
They do need that. And I think, it's interesting when my kids were little, it seemed like there were so many activities and there was almost a societal pressure to have them in everything. Like they had to go to school, then they had to be in ballet, and then on the weekends they had to be in t-ball, and they just had to be in everything. And if you didn't do that, you felt kind of pressured to do that. And it took a minute for me to say, we don't have to do that. My little one, my daughter, she didn't want to do ballet. She hated it so much. And she was the one rolling around on the stage and not doing the things. I said, why are we doing this? You just want to stay home and play? She's like, yeah, I really want to just stay home and play. So that's what we did. We stayed home and played and got in the dirt and finger painted all over the place. And that was a way better time for our family.
COVID, while terrible and hard for lots of reasons, some of the wonderful benefits for us was just being as a family at home. And it was really nice to we didn't have any pressure. There was no let's make sure you didn't have to keep up with the Joneses. It was just, let's be at home together. Let's enjoy time together. And it was so sweet and it was so nice. And every now and then we're like, what if we just pretended? Like, what if do we have to do all of these things? And there's a lot of pressure, like you said, to do all of the things. And I don't think that they're all necessary or even necessarily healthy. We let my daughter do a competitive team this year, and we specifically, we thought we would do the right thing, and we chose like a less serious competitive team. We were like, this is like a light one, it's no big deal, and it's just taking over our weekends. And even she's like, I mean, it's fun while I'm there, but then I'm tired on Monday, and then I didn't get to spend any time with you guys, and I just wanted to play with my sister, and I spent the whole time at this auditorium, and so yeah, I think it's finding the balance is important.
Yeah, the playtime, the imagination,
Yes, it's so
the
important.
creating their little worlds outside and even inside. It's
Absolutely.
magical. There's magical times, and they only have this much time where they do that.
It's so short,
and so it's important, I think, for them to do that.
yes,
I
I
don't
think it's
know.
essential that they have downtime and free time to play and be and explore and figure out who they're going to be. I mean, my youngest has gotten into origami and she's gotten really good at that. My oldest is
I
into
saw your
crochet.
what was it, triceratops? Was
The
it
Triceratops is really cute. Oh my gosh.
I was like, oh my
She
God.
brought me that, and it was just
How old
like,
is she?
what?
I
She's 9.
I was amazed. 9, and she made a triceratops. It was
Trying to
crazy.
see if I had one on my desk. I usually have, she has these dragons that sit on your fingers, but I don't have any of her good ones. Sometimes I get the leftovers, but yeah, no, she makes these little elephants, and she brought me that one. I was like, oh my gosh. And then that little Triceratops went with us to the grocery store with us all over the place. She's so cute. And she's really into that. And my oldest is busy, knitting and doing crochet. And it's just like they wouldn't have time for that. And they wouldn't, choose to do those activities if they weren't, if they didn't have
How
downtime.
old is your oldest?
She's 11. She'll be 12 next month, though. So she's almost 12.
And she's knitting
Yes. And crocheting
and
and like
crocheting.
hats and things, and she does ballet, and so she knit herself or crocheted herself rather, leg warmers because it was the winter, and she just kind of wanted those. It's kind of like very 80s, but like she decided to do it all by herself. And then the other kids liked them, and then so she's been crocheting them for the other kids in the class.
Well, there's a show, I don't think it's 80s anymore. I think with ballet, it's always
Yeah, they
kind
always
of
do them, I think.
current. There's what is that there's a show on, I don't know, there's so many streaming channels now, so I don't know which one it's on, but it's about, France and the United States, and they swap stars in their ballet, and
Oh,
this
cool.
really feisty ballerina comes, to the United States Ballet, and
So
it's
kind
a
of Prince
wonder.
and the Pauper.
Yeah, it's well, kind of, but they do it on purpose, and it really
Okay.
sparks the New York ballet scene, and it's really a great show, and I think it's brought a lot of attention to ballet from people who weren't ever interested in ballet, but they were leg warmers all the time, is my
Well, there
point,
you go.
and it's a great show. If I could think of the name of it, you'll see the subtitle. I'll roll it across when I find it.
She'll put it on there
Um,
for you. It'll be good.
I have applied, for an intern at 3 different universities in our local area because I need somebody to look this stuff up like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I need a Jamie in the room to look things up and to help me with editing and social media because I'm an old darn woman, and I'm not good at this social media gig.
It's a new game. Yeah, I've
I need so much
accidentally
help.
gotten good at it.
No, I'm terrible. So bad.
You find all of the people though, and it's good, and you have a very
Yeah, but I
professional setup.
found you.
Yes,
And how I found you, I was, scrolling through Substack because I hate social media, but I love Substack because there are thoughtful, intelligent people posting nice things, and you don't get these horrible screaming wars with people.
that's
And
right.
you had a post about these two books as a homeschool mom, and one was Free to Learn, and the other one was The Well Trained Mind, which were completely opposing philosophies,
Yes,
and you kind of married those. And when I first saw that, I went, "Wait, what? Wait," because I'm an educator and an administrator, former principal, and I thought that how does that work? And so I read your essay and went, "Oh, that does work." And then just talking to you just now and making sure our kids have the freedom to play and to learn and to experience everything, it made a lot of sense. So I know what those books are, but I'm sure many people listening right now have no idea what those books are. So why don't you just kind of fill us in a little bit on what those books are?
sure. So we'll start with Well Trained Mind, which is by Susan Weiss Bauer, and it's about the classical education model. And there, there's a really long history of the classical model of education, and she just wrote a book that's mostly around like the how to take it and bring it home. This for the
Hmm.
homeschooler. And it kind of let's say let's talk about like kind of core tenets of the classical model. It tends to be very rigorous, very strict. It believes in you know you're not just raising a child for education, but for virtue, for character, for they believe very strongly in reading of the great literature. They believe in philosophy and very historical studies and having a lot of depth in those things. Thinking about logically, even like down to the way the writing is done is very programmatic. Like it's like, oh, we do this and we do that. And we have these exercises and we do these exercises, which by the way, I really like. I really like a lot of these things. I think that we should be raising our kids for character. Um, and reading the great books is incredible. And so it's that kind of model. And they definitely have a lot of opinions about, that education is formation and that we should be taking it very seriously. And there's all these processes that children need to go through, and it's very important. On the other side, you have Peter Gray's Free to Learn, and that is an unschooling model. And it is saying that we need to be lighting a fire with our children, or rather, actually, it assumes that children come into the world with a fire lit, right? They
Hmm.
want to learn. Little kids want to help you in the kitchen. They want to help you fold the laundry. They want to help you sweep. They want to help you do all these things. They want to learn to count. They want to learn to read because you're reading to them. They want to play. They want to imagine. They want to draw. They want to do all these incredible things. And, and that if we just keep that fire burning, that they will then naturally want to learn all sorts of things that are in the world. And they kind of sit in this opposing model because Peter Gray uh, is very much about this idea that children will naturally find something they're interested in and then go to the depths of that. Versus the classical model is we have to bring that to the children, otherwise they won't do it. And we have to kind of make maybe they wouldn't say it this way, but there's a little bit more of like, we're going to force the kids to do this. And I live very much in between, in the sense that I
Hmm.
feel that children need both. There are definitely things that need to be brought to our children. And one of the ones I always say is my children fell in love with the Hagia Sophia because we were doing history. They're not going to just stumble across the Hagia Sophia out in the world, right?
Right.
So I had to bring that to them. At the same time point, we took the Hagia Sophia where I could have just said, oh, this is the Hagia Sophia, Justinian built it, blah, blah, blah. Instead, they were really excited and interested in it. So in an unschooling model, we took time to go down deep and went, let's explore this more. Let's learn about the architecture. Let's learn about the iconography. Let's learn about, more about the history. And so there's this pairing of that children, that you take education very seriously, but that education should also be fun and joyous, and that both of those things can be true at the same time. And I feel very strongly, even in the way that I teach history, I asked the kids about it. It's like when I teach history, like they think it's one of the most fun subjects they do. And it's bringing in art and literature and music and all of those things that a classical model might want you to do, but we do it in a way that in our home that is fun and playful and joyous, and the kids love to do it. So
So when your children grow and graduate, you may need to go into the school system. They need you there.
Yeah,
Because if I had
possibly.
had a
I
history
started
teacher
there,
like
right? So I
you, I might
started
have
in the
really liked it.
yes, I started there, right? I started at the university system.
Hmm.
I taught at the university for, almost 2 decades, really, depending on how you count, before I started homeschooling. But yes, and that was a large part of it, was that a lot of times when we have these college students, they don't a lot of them, and it's most of them, aren't really interested in being there, right? So it is a lot of how do you reignite this like excitement of learning. And that's what I would spend most of my time in the classroom trying to do, is like, this is fun, I promise. Like, we can do this. And how do you relate to kids, these college students that I was in engineering, so a lot of them are like, oh, why did you get into engineering? They're like, mom said that it was give me a good job. And it's like, well, I mean, that's probably true, but you also need to like being here. So there's
Well,
other
and
things
I
too.
that's interesting that you say that because that's a lot of the reason why we think kids need to learn, right? To get a job. You need to learn to get a job. You need to learn to get a job. But maybe one of the reasons you need to learn is to be a good citizen and to learn all of the things that the world has to offer. And then once you learn all of those things, like your children, and you find that thing that brings you passion, brings you joy, then that might be the thing that you pursue. And then because you love it and you pursue it, then that is the thing that you pursue as a career. And then that will, we need to eat, we need to pay the bills, but maybe we pursue that in a liberal arts beginning, and then we go from there and not, and we
Yes,
find our way that way rather than I need to study engineering because I need to get a good job.
you need a good job.
That might be, but so you are an engineer, but you're a neuroscientist.
Yes.
So help me make sense of that.
All right. So in academia, it's very rare that you have a single specialty. So all of my degrees are technically in biomedical engineering. So engineering degrees, my undergraduate degree was biomedical engineering. But when I became a graduate student, you pick a line of research. And the research that I was in within the biomedical engineering department was neuroscience, more specifically neurophysiology, but people don't tend to know what that means. So I just say neuroscience. It's a subdivision of neuroscience. And so I studied the brain, and all of my research was in studying the brain. And And that's how, and so my undergraduate work, or sorry, my graduate work was mostly working on basic mechanisms, like the very foundational, like how is it the brain learns to do X? How, specifically, it was postural control. How does the brain, you know, um, make sure that you're in the right space? How does it learn to do that? How does it maintain to do those kinds of things? And
What
then
is
from
postural control?
postural control is how do you stand up straight and not fall over? So not
Love
just
it.
like,
Dance
oh,
posture, postural control. It's had my
yes, yes. So how do you make sure that you don't fall over when you're walking, or, and more specifically, we're interested in what parts of the brain allow you to do that? What kinds of sensory information allows you to do that? What do you need, and what is most important that you need? And why that would be important is for people who have lost those kinds of. So, like, how important is the vestibular system? Most people will think about the inner ear, but it's basically the system that, when you spin your head, like it's telling you where your head is in space. How important is that system to making sure you don't fall over? Well, it's important. And so if we can understand how it's important and why it's important, then we can develop therapies to help people who have lost that capacity. My graduate work was very basic science, so we weren't asking the big picture questions from a clinical perspective. It was, we need to understand this basic system, and from there, then I went to do my postdoc work at Northwestern, and that is when I transitioned into the more clinical pieces. So then I worked directly with individuals who'd had a stroke, and we started trying to help them develop better strategies. Though I kind of switched, I wasn't doing postural control anymore. I was doing more learning and hand manipulation, which is that's a really big problem for individuals who had a stroke.
And then somehow you veered from, and while you were doing all of that, you were teaching?
Yes. So I yes, and I taught as a I taught as a TA, starting as, in graduate school. But when I became a postdoc, so I already had my doctorate at that point, then I actually really love teaching. And so I applied for and was awarded a NIH fellowship, which allowed me to dedicate
Oh, that's
time to
National
learning.
Institute of Health.
Yes, sorry, National Institutes of Health, a dedicated grant that allowed me time to learn how to teach and the best mechanisms to teach, which doesn't sound super fancy, but it's actually really important. Most faculty, most academics are not taught how to teach. It's just like, hey, neuroscience, or you took this class, here's a class, teach it. There's no, it really is just like that. And they're not taught basic, like, what are the best ways to teach or any of that kind of stuff. They're like, here's a textbook, pick one, or pick one of these textbooks and just start teaching. And but I was really engaged with teaching. I thought teaching was really exciting. And also I was really interested in how the brain learned, because that was what I was doing in my research. And so I kind of combined all those interests together. And that's when I started teaching full scale university classes. And I was in charge of the classroom myself, as opposed to being a TA, you're not really in charge of the classroom. So
So when did you go from, learning, studying posture and studying hands and studying heads and brains and all of that, and moving that into the child realm instead of the adult realm? What was the shift? What made you say, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to do this instead?
well, I'm feeling a couple of gaps before we get there, because I think that'll help. So I finished my postdoctoral work in Chicago, and then I took a professor job, assistant professor job, at Arizona State University out here. And I was doing that, and I was in the mix of that, and I was very interested in learning. So I wasn't just doing, I was still working in individuals with stroke and spinal cord and some prosthetics and things of this nature. But I was moving more and more into the interest of learning itself and how is the best way to learn and under what conditions do students learn best. And so I had kind of dual tracks that I was doing. I was both doing this more clinical focused research with people who've had a stroke, and I was doing research that was, how do we give students the best? How do we ignite learning in students? How do we get them to learn better in the classroom? So I was already doing that, and then COVID happened, and my children came home from school, and I realized that my children were starting to not like learning. And they didn't really fully understand that until they were home with us. And um, I fell completely in love with teaching my children. I didn't know that. I didn't expect that. My kids had been in daycare since they were 9 months old, both of them. And so I just had this time to be with them, but my oldest was technically kindergarten age during COVID, um, and so I was like looking up all the things and trying to figure it out. And we just fell in love with being together. And so that it happened to be happenstance that I was already interested in learning to begin with. And so I already had this really strong background. So then take that knowledge and apply it to early education. But it still was a steep learning curve for me because I had never taught anyone how to read before. They had already, right. And that's a different thing.
Mhm.
And of course, I was lucky because I'm just super fascinated with all of this. So I just did crazy amounts of research and dug down and read all the books and looked at all the academic research. But the interest in childhood development was exclusively because of my own children. And then it was a strong desire to teach them well. And I don't think I've ever been more motivated to do anything in my whole life. So
Well, I mean, I'm not happy that COVID happened, but for you, I'm really happy COVID happened.
yeah,
I mean,
we feel the same way. We feel the same way. We feel lucky. It changed our lives and put us on a completely different trajectory. And we all feel very grateful that it happened, though we are not grateful that it happened in terms of the universe. And that was very hard for lots of people. So,
it's super hard. Yeah. So what if what if your children taught you that your PhD did not teach you?
oh, that's a really good question. Well, I would say it more like this. So my PhD wasn't in early childhood development. So I've learned I've got textbooks on that, and I've learned all sorts of things about that since then. And so that I guess my PhD taught me how to be able to read and live in that space. I think the thing that my children have taught me is how different every single individual is, and and how we have to figure out ways how to adapt to that. And that as a scientist, that, you're playing in statistics land. And in statistics, you're really just trying to get, oh, well, 80% of people did this. So therefore we're right. It's like, well, it's confusing, right? Like, there's always an exception. And generally there's more than one exception. And there's these large population models. And so when you look at my children, I have two children who genetically are very similar. They look like twins. They get confused as twins all the time, but they are very different, both in their aptitudes, like what they are particularly talented in. One is very talented with words, one is very talented with numbers, and also in temperament. Their temperament is very different. One is more of a perfectionist, and one is more of a free spirit. And the way that they tackle challenges is very different. So again, it gets into temperament. And so even though there are certain truths, if you will, from a neuroscience perspective about how best it is for early language exposure, for example, is a really simple one. The more sophisticated, the more complex language, the more vocabulary they're exposed to, the more, like, and mostly people do that through just reading books to children, the better the children will be off. And that is kind of a universal truth. However, the way I got my oldest to love reading was different from the way I got my youngest to love reading. And the types of books that they read now are different. And the way that I encourage them into books is different because they're different little humans. Um, so I think maybe that there's just so many differences and that we still have to treat children as the unique, beautiful little individuals that they are.
So what did that look like for your kids? I mean, what strategies did you use for one child that were different than the strategies that you used for the other child? Because mine were
So,
the same way, very, very different, and I didn't learn until later. It was because my little one was dyslexic, and we didn't figure that out till she was 15 years old.
oh wow.
I know, little girls are sneaky with dyslexia.
Yes. Well,
They
if you have
really are.
if you're a really sharp kid, sometimes
Mhm.
they will just, you just don't know because
Yeah,
they just figure it out.
yeah.
I certainly had that my oldest because she didn't because of her schooling situation, and then she went through these kind of weird, COVID years. There were definitely holes in her phonics, but she was smart, so she just kind of figured them out. And it wasn't until the words got really complicated and she couldn't, it was like she couldn't do it. And then it was funny because my youngest would be able to do it because I had done all the really proper, like I had done it really proper for her and she'd had a stronger basis. Um, let's see, what are some of the biggest? differences. Um, I think it has a lot to do with with kind of their innate interests. Um, with my oldest, it's a lot more of we have to encourage her into things. Like she doesn't tend to want to take on the super challenging thing, but she tends to always be able to handle it once she's coaxed into it, so to speak.
Mhm.
But like with learning, with like reading, like to try to get her to want to read on her own. She came home from school hating reading, which was terrible. And so we spent a lot of time. I read to them at night, and we did these. We the biggest breakthrough for us is that I would read to them every night, and I picked up these book series that had cliffhangers at the end, and then I would finish the chapter, it'd be a cliffhanger, and she'd be like, "No, keep going," and I was like, "It's bedtime, gotta go sleep." And then she was like, "Can I read ahead?" And I was like, "Yes, yes, you can read ahead." And so that kind of started that for her. And then the little one wanted to read so much because the biggest one, the older one, wanted to read.
Mhm.
But also the kinds of books so as we encourage them to read more complex books, my oldest, what she's interested in, she's much more interested in like mysteries and history and traveling the world kind of books. And my youngest one is definitely more into dragons and dinosaurs and, big quests and that kind of thing, and animals, veterinarian kind of stuff. So as we encourage them, as they look for books to ignite, and that gets into that middle ground we were talking to at the beginning, like, you know, in the classical model says you need to be reading the classics and these, deeper books. And then the unschooling model says you need to find what they love. And I'm like, what if we found classics that they love? So, they don't all have to they don't have to read all the exact same books. It's good to be able to have some books in common, and there'll be some that'll encourage them more strongly as they get older,
Mhm.
because they're, if you're going to go into the world, there's certain books that it's good to have a core basics in. But, we're still in that for my youngest, she's still in that, she's third grade, still more into that, like, let's just get the habit of loving reading. So it's like, let's find books that match you and what you're excited about, what you're interested in. And there's so many books, out there.
So many books, and there are so many classics even at the 3rd grade level, and I'm sure your kids are reading much higher than the 3rd grade level.
Yes.
So, you can find all kinds of stuff for
There's
them
a
to
lot of
read.
choices. In fact, actually, that's it's hard in its own way, because then you have kids that you're like, what kid? Because they could read something really advanced. You're like, yeah, but not that one yet. So it's like
Not
trying to
quite there.
find books
Not quite there.
that are age appropriate.
No, it is. If you're looking for a good reading list, Liberty Common has a great reading list.
Oh, awesome! I will have to
Yeah,
check that out.
so check out their website. They're here in Fort Collins. They're the number 1 charter school in Fort Collins, and they're a classical school, and their reading list is extensive. So
That's
it's
wonderful.
a good one to check out. Um, so I have notes and I can't even read my own notes. Isn't that terrible?
That's how I live that way now. My
My my
eyesight's
whole
going.
world. But, do you think there's a gap between how we think kids learn and how they actually learn? Adults, do we get it wrong how kids learn?
I think that kind of depends on the adult. Um, I've met a lot of people who absolutely understand how kids learn, and I've met a lot of people who don't. I will say that I think so. This is coming as a scientist. When I moved from a very strict discipline, so engineering and neuroscience are very strict um, scientific engineering disciplines, to the education realm. The education research is not very good. And that's
No
saying it
kidding.
very nicely.
No, you can say that loud
It's
and proud.
it's really
It's
bad.
really
It's
awful.
really
It's
bad, and
really awful.
it's not done well.
No.
In fact, actually, I remember when I was trying to do some studies, when I was first at the university, when I was first starting to do this stuff, and I was designing a proper study. I was like, we need a control group, and we need, this and that. We need to have the right kind of, the amount of this kind of tests and
You mean
whatever.
your
And they're
study
like,
wasn't based on feelings and opinions?
yeah. So anyway, so I set to try to do that, and they were like, why don't you just publish what you did last year in the classroom? And I was like, but what I did last year in the classroom wasn't a study. That was just something I did in the classroom.
Mhm.
And and apparently that was okay. And I was like, I'm very confused. Like, so I quickly kind of moved away from that. And then when I got into my kids stuff, um, it's just impossible. There's some that have been done well, and there's enough kind of anecdotal evidence in certain areas that's fine. What I would say, what I have started doing is going back to neuroscience research and saying, well, we know how the brain develops, and we know when the brain develops, and we know at what time point these things are important. And
Mhm.
what if we developed an education around that? Because that science is better. But I do also think, again, pairing this back to that children are still individuals. Do I think that we get it right as a society? No, it's clear and obvious that we are not getting it right as a society. I mean, the kids in school have never read worse and have done math more poorly. I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's never been easier in that way to stand out from an education perspective. But I think that there is a whole environmental part to that. It's not just the educational system, though I don't think that that's what it was. So do I think we get it wrong? Yeah, I think we get it wrong a lot.
So if you say it's not just the educational system, that there's a whole environmental factor to that, what do you think that might be?
I think it has a lot to do with, if you want your kids to read, you should be reading. And I doubt that many parents are reading a lot of books. I think that it's also about if sitting down at the kitchen table and doing math homework with your kid. It's about creating a culture that values reading and math and doing well in school. And I don't think we have, when I was a kid, that was the value. In the 80s, that was the like you're supposed to do well in school, and it wasn't good to not do well in school. And so that was the value, the cultural value was around that. And it doesn't seem to be the major cultural value anymore. And,
Mm.
and culture starts in the home. And, when people ask me, I can't get my kid to read, I say, are you reading a book? Are you reading? Do they see you reading? That was one of the, I was, we talked about me reading to the kids. Well, I mean, that's me demonstrating that I'm reading to the kids, but I did more than that. I would go in fact, we talked about, I don't have great eyesight, so I tend to read on my phone so I can enlarge the text. But when my kids were little, I would go get a physical book, because if I had a physical book and I sat down on the couch with a physical book and read that physical book, I had two little children sitting next to me reading their physical books. And so it's creating a home environment. We have a home library now. We taught those early years, we didn't have a TV in the house, so it's creating a culture, an environment that says that cues, we read as a family together, we play outside, we love nature, we don't watch the TV mindlessly. And now we have the TV back because they're older and it's not as hard, but we watch one family movie a week and that's how we use it. And they don't ever ask, it's Wednesday and they had the afternoon off today because we talked about the dentist and stuff earlier. And um, but they didn't say, "Hey, mom, can I turn on the TV? What can I watch the TV?" They're outside playing because that's what they do and that's our world. Or they might be doing origami. Talked about origami, right? Or knitting or crochet. But like those are tasks that they have, and I think so. I do think that even within a classroom, even within a classroom setting, that there has to be there's something called social proof. Have you ever heard of social proof? Probably.
I have, but why don't
Yeah.
you explain it?
Yeah. So in the psychology realm, there's social proof, and that means that you look to others and like others, to similar others, people who are like you, to decide what to do if there's uncertainty. And so if you're in a classroom and you're feeling uncertain, which is for a lot of kids, right? You're in a classroom, you're feeling uncertain, and the vast majority of those kids think whatever it is you're doing is boring. Well, even if you are inclined to maybe like it, you're going to go with, this is probably boring and I'm just going to, try to fit in, and the other kids don't seem to like it. So I'm not going to like it either. Versus if you go into a classroom where 80% of the kids really love what they're doing and love being there, even if you're like on the fence, you might be like, well, I'm going to try to like it because everybody else seems to like it. And so I think you have to create a culture that, and there's a home culture and then there's a classroom culture and then there's a culture is in the country. So
Hmm. It seems like you have some really sound values and principles in your home, and you follow and live those every day. And your children have been raised with those, so they know what they are, they know what the expectations are. And it's like getting up in the morning and brushing your teeth and go to the bathroom. It's just what you do. It's not,
yes.
we don't question it. It's just life in the Honeycutt house. By the way, your name's like the best name ever, Honeycutt. I love this name.
Thank you. It's very
Love
cute.
so much. But so if we're talking about culture and we're talking about how to make sure our children are learning, and education system is part of it, because we can talk about the fallacies of the education system all day long. And I think most of the people in the American culture understand the fallacies of the education system. Now, some people are defending them and thinking that it's okay to teach things that aren't educationally related, academically related in the classroom. And, we can have that conversation another time. But my feeling is, if it's not academically related, it doesn't belong in the schools. But I can't go into someone's home and tell them how to raise their children. That's a bridge too far. Now, we also have people in the education system who do believe that teachers should be going into the homes and meeting with parents. But what they want to bring into the home is probably very different than what you might want to bring into the home, what I might want to bring into the home. So if we're going to address this need for parents to sit with their children and to read with their children and do math homework with their children, a- and you've got parents who are so many single parents, and you've got moms working 2 and 3 jobs, and dads working 2 and 3 jobs, and there's just chaos in the house. How do we balance that? What can we do to encourage that? How do we encourage the parents because we've got millennials now. You're probably a millennial, right? Are you a
Technically
millennial?
Gen X, but yeah, I'm on the
Oh, so
cusp.
I'm a Gen X too, so we're on
Yeah.
opposite Gen X spectrum.
Yes. Yes.
But we've got so many, Gen X is the coolest
It
generation.
was.
I'm
We're the
sorry, y'all. Gen X
best.
is the
We're the
coolest
best.
generation. We have been raised without technology, with
Yes. And
technology.
with.
We have seen it all. Latchkey kids. We were raised on hose water and neglect. Let
Yes.
me tell you, nobody has seen it like we have. But
I spent a lot of time playing in the creek, but
yes,
so
we would find shark's teeth. It was great
it
times.
was a great life.
But we've got people that the parents are on Instagram all of the time, and they're on TikTok
Yep.
all of the time, and they're doing
Yes.
all of the things. So how do we reach the parents so that they can role model for the children, so that they're not on social media all of the time, and that they are not on the television all of the time, and they are with the kids when they're home? What is the solution to that?
I wish I had a really great answer for that. I'm going to shift back to the social proof thing. I think you have to convince people one at a time,
Hmm.
and you have to reach those people one at a time. And if there's a growing movement, and I think that there is, there's this young kid. I think he's a late teenager. He's between 17 and 19. Like, I don't know if he's still in high school or not. And he just started like reading classic books, and he would just go on, and he's on Instagram being like, I'm gonna read this cool book, and he's like, it's like, and it'll be like Hard Times, like Dickens, and he's like, and he just talks about it. And I think it's going to be about people deciding it's important. I think it didn't used to be that you had to create that culture. But so the opposite had to have happened, where they decided where it wasn't important. And I think that we're trying to push back the other direction. And I think it's possible. I think if you have enough people that are doing it, and maybe, just getting out there. And that's one of the reasons I write. I write so that people will, see that there's this other way to live, it really isn't, there's these small, subtle habits that you can do that change the way your kids experience. I do also understand what's going on. You mentioned a lot of different, factors in terms of, parents are trying to do it by themselves, or they're single parents. I will point out, I'm in the homeschool realm. I'm not a homeschool maximalist, for the record. I think that there's a lot of different ways to educate children, and I think people need to find the best path for them. But I will speak just within the homeschool uh, realm. I have interviewed two single parents who homeschooled their kids. And so, and the reason I point that out is because I think anything's possible if you want to make it possible.
Hmm.
So one of them was like literally living on food stamps, and was hobbling together things at the library, and she was taking online classes so that she could get into a job. She ended up taking, I think it was something in the software realm, so she was able to work from home and have her kids there, and she was able to do that. Another one, hers had to do with a medical thing with her husband, and so he effectively wasn't, even though that she was technically married, but she was basically doing it all on her own. And she just picked up jobs at like driving the school bus for field trips. She would just take her kids, so then her kids got to go on all these cool field trips, but she was getting paid to go on them. And so there's ways to make things work. I've interviewed people who were, living out in a rural life, and so it's like it has to people have to decide it's important enough to them that
Mhm.
they're willing to make sacrifices to do it. And I know that it's not possible for everybody. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying, hey, you need to homeschool your kids. I'm just saying that just deciding to, even if your kid goes to a public school, deciding to be involved, going to the PTA, deciding that it matters, deciding to pick which school your kids are gonna go to, and being involved in that, or being involved in the school choice movement, or just speaking out about things. I think that the more people do that, the more people you just read to your kids. Like, I mean, you don't even have to do anything political. You can just read to your children. Just read to them at night, read to them, your middle school age kids. Just create that kind of culture at your home, in your home at night. It doesn't in and on the weekends. There's if you decide it's important. And how do we convince people to do it? I think we do it, and we model it, and we tell people how wonderful it is, and hopefully they'll come along for the ride eventually.
Well, I agree that reading is probably the singular most important thing you can do for your kids. There are a lot of things you can do, but I think reading is probably the most impact, the biggest bang for your buck, for your time.
Agreed.
Well, 100%. Um, I had another thought and I just lost it. I hate when that
It
happens.
happens to me all the time when I'm interviewing, because I actually started taking notes, because I'll be like,
That's what I should do.
and I'll
I
be
need to
like, and then I'll be like, oh, what did I
a
have to
clipboard.
say?
Oh, I remember. I know what I was listening.
Okay.
I was going to say I have great faith in Gen Z, though. I think Gen Z seems to see things turning a little bit, and I think they're stepping away from social media a little bit. I know they stepped away from drinking an awful lot, which is crazy to me because when I was in my 20s and college years, I was going to the bars with my
Yep.
friends and we were dancing, we're having a good old time. And I don't know if it's because, people are using their
On their
cameras and taking
phones. Yeah.
pictures and making embarrassing videos of them, recordings of them, or if they're just staying low key. I mean, I don't know if that's part of it or not, but I do know that they're a much more settled generation than our generation was because we were kind of a wild generation, our
Yes.
generation.
Well, one thing
But
that
we
was
didn't
really
have the pressure of social media. We didn't have any of that.
we didn't. One of the things I found was super fascinating when I was at the university. So I had a intro class that I was required to teach in the university, and I more or less kind of, it didn't change that much over the course of the 10 years I was there. And when I first started there, I would have conversations. It was kind of about managing your time. So I did like Covey's, urgent, not urgent, kind of,
Mhm. The
paradigm,
whole
important, not important. Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was first there, I was saying things like, well, and Instagram, and
yeah.
whatever else, I guess it was Twitter at the time. It's like, these seem urgent, but they're not actually important. And I remember at the time, like when I first started doing it, you could tell the kids were like, oh, like you could tell they were pondering this and thinking it over. And by the later times when I was there, you could tell the kids were starting to like roll their eyes, like, no. Like it was so I had to almost change it. And then it was fascinating the way, when I first started at the university, and so that would have been like 2015 for the record. So like it's like 11 years ago now. But when I first started at the university, they all had their computers and they were typing. They were typing on their computers.
Mhm.
And by the time I left, if a student was there with a computer, they usually had it flipped over, they were writing on it like this. And almost all of them, and I would ask them, "Oh, I noticed you guys have switched to noting." They're like, "Oh, well, you learn better if you have to take physical notes with with fingers and with your hands." And I was like, "Yes, you were correct, and I didn't have to tell you that." So there was definitely a shift, and I think the students were definitely starting to understand that. At the same time point, I think that they were still locked into. I don't think that there was still plenty of them that were not learning because they love to learn. That was still kind of turned off for a lot of them.
That's a shame.
It was.
That's a real shame. That was, I loved my time in school and I went to school a lot. I was in school, got one degree out, went back to school, got another degree out, went back to school, got another. And
I
I
did a
did
lot of school
learn,
too.
I learned more. Yeah. Well, you are a neuroscientist. Of course you went to law school. I just kept changing my interests. My interests just kept changing. The first time I went to school, it was playtime. It was just so much fun. And I remember my mother dropping me off and telling me, college is a party. And if you get good grades, you could stay at the party. Well, I got okay grades. I mean, some classes I got better grades. I got A's and B's, and other classes, not so much. I interviewed for a job with where a friend of mine was. the big boss at the job in this interview. And he asked me, he said, we have your transcripts. I was like, oh, good Lord. Because I turned them in and I don't, I'm an old woman. Who's looking at my college transcripts from a
Right.
hundred
I'm
million?
not supposed to do that.
Well, they did. And my
Yeah.
later transcripts, the second and third time I went back to school, president's list, dean's list, I mean, very, very strong. But that first time around, that bachelor's degree, not quite so strong. And he asked me, he said, so, what happened? These early years, not as great. And what changed? And I said, I wish I had a great answer for you, but I was just having fun. There wasn't really any great aha moment. I didn't have an epiphany. I grew up. And he said, oh, no, no, no. There had to be something. And this is one of the most brilliant people that
Right.
I've ever known in my life. I mean, he's a genius. And I'm like, I don't have a genius answer for you. I was there having a great time. I was going out and dancing and drinking and getting hangovers and then I wasn't. That's the answer. So, you know who you are. I won't say your name out loud, but that's the answer. There was no epiphany. I just was having fun and then I grew up.
So you just have to
That's all
grow
there
up.
was. That's all
I
there was.
had I had a student in my lab at the university, and he had gotten, and I think he did fine for his first undergraduate degree. He had gotten his degree, I think, in English or something, and then he had gone and done the Corps for 2 years. And so he decided while he was doing that that he wanted to do something more substantive, and he came back and he was doing his degree in biomedical engineering. And he was just a different because he was, he was a couple years older than everybody else, but the level of focus and intensity and drive was so different. And he talks a lot about that. He's like, yeah, the first time I was here, I mean, he did fine. Like he wasn't, he's like, I just was doing it because I was supposed to do it. And I didn't even really know what I wanted to do. So just kind of picked English because I was good at English
Mhm.
and he was good at languages, was why he did the Peace Corps because he picked up other languages and stuff. And he said, but this time I really want to do this. I really want to do it.
Yeah.
And so he was very driven. He was working he didn't have to work in the lab, right? He worked in the lab. He did, his own research project. We got him a paper out of it, all of those kinds of things. He was just really driven. And I talk a lot about that with my own children. And I don't want college to feel like this default. It's
Mhm.
like you can go if it gets you where you want to go. But you need to know where you're going first. And I would rather you spend 2 years working at a job or a couple of jobs or interning in a bunch of different places to decide, hey, I'm for sure this is what I want to do. And then you're going in and you're driving, and you're like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna do this and I have a point to do this, and I need this to get me where I want to go. And the answer, depending on what they want to do, they might not have to go through college. There's other ways to get to places, right? Depending on,
Oh, absolutely.
what it is they want to do. So, yeah, I think, that kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation around igniting this and then keeping that fire
Mhm.
lit. And part of keeping that fire lit is then taking charge of their education.
Right. And
And we
when you
do,
grow up, then then like when I went back, I was older, I was more mature, and I knew what I wanted to do. I
right,
knew what that was. So then you get excited about it and then you do much better.
exactly. And so we do every year. I run a bunch of different clubs in my house. So we have a science club, we have a culture club, and uh, and we always have at the end we do a curiosity fair. And the idea is take all
I
these things
love
that we've
that.
learned. What are you curious about? And we're gonna pull that together into something. And so, like one year, my oldest decided to write a novel. So, and she still hasn't finished it. She's been working on it for a while, but she works on it. It's still a very big part of her thing. But the curiosity fair sparked it for her. My youngest decided she's really into geology, and so she started like a whole project around that. One year, like my oldest, we studied rivers and how rivers move, and actually rivers, we think about rivers as being these like things that just oh, that's the way the river goes, but it actually transitions a lot over
Mhm.
time. And I wanted to do an art project that actually traced like the Mississippi River and with colors and kind of looked at how it changed and it turned into the school art project. So, I mean, find the things that they're interested in and let them explore those deeply. And so now she knows all sorts of very deep things about river transits, which is unusual to know about. But the point is that, allow them to know about something, to explore something, to keep that fire alive, and then that helps them in the next year to do the same thing.
So it's like you give them the freedom, but then you also give them the structure in which to
Yes.
operate within the freedom. So it's
Yes.
marrying those 2 ideas together
Yes.
again. Right. Um, so thinking of those 2 ideas, the freedom and the structure together, do children need to be taught how to think, or do they just learn naturally if we get out of their way?
Is it gonna be frustrating if I say both?
Absolutely not, because that would be my answer too.
So I mean, I do think that everyone has to kind of discover for themselves their best process for learning, like, and under what conditions they learn. Like, some people are gonna learn better with silence. Some people are gonna learn better with, like, classical music. Some people wanna, like, jam out with, like, binaural beats. Like, there's all these different things. But I do think that it's good for us to bring opportunities to our children and say, "Do you learn better in this way?" So, we'll take math for my oldest. That's my one that's gifted with words. So math is more of a struggle for her. I have brought a lot of different ways of learning math to her. And through that process, we have learned how she learns. Um, is it possible she would have eventually figured that out? Probably, maybe, but I bet she'd be a lot older, but we now know a lot of the core things that help her learn math and what programs are going to work best for her and even why. Like, I can even tell you why, and she could tell you why. And my youngest is a little different, and the way that we come at it is a little different. I I, I think that it always helps to have a guide or a mentor to help you. I mean, like, if you decided to start a brand new business or you decided, I mean, even now, like, I decided I wanted to learn more about math, for my kids, right? I wanna learn, so I already learned kind of like how the math works in the brain. I was really interested in that, but now I'm trying to, like, I don't know math in its entirety, so I don't just go, "I'm just gonna go get a textbook on math and learn." No, I'm reading a book called Measurement by Paul Lockhart. He's a mathematician, and he's explaining to me what math means to him. I'm listening to talks on people who are mathematicians and how math seems to be like an art to them. It seems like puzzles and mysteries, and it's like, okay, I've never really thought about it that way. That's a different way to think about it. And how do I bring that to my children? So my point is that even when I'm learning something new, I'm finding mentors. Even though they may not be in-person mentors, they're still mentors. They're still I'm gonna understand this person's perspective. I'm gonna understand that person's perspective when I start, right. So I think it's important that we be mentors and, to our children to the best of our ability. And I think that you learn that process through being mentored through it. And eventually that will be a voice in their own head that says, what if there's a different way? Maybe there's a better way for me to learn this. Maybe I should go out and look for that. So I'm hoping that my 20-year-old child who gets stuck on something will think about that.
I think that's a great idea. Do your kids have, other mentors other than you and your husband?
Um, yes, in what cases? I mean, they certainly have other teachers, so they have extracurricular teachers and things like that. I will say that the answer to that outside of family, I mean, my parents, my husband's parents, outside of family, they probably don't have a lot of strong voices in their lives. And I would also say that that's on purpose.
Mhm.
I want to be the strong voice in their head, and that will change soon. And that, as they go through those puberty stages, their brain will literally start telling them that they need to start looking for other sources. And my goal for high school is that they do have other voices in their lives that act as mentors. And I will probably curate that to some extent. in those early teen years. And, those 17 and 18, those junior and senior years, I mean, the goal is for launch. So, I'm hoping to help them be finding their own mentors. And I want them to understand that process very much, because they're going to have to do it without us. And well, I mean, not forever. Like if they say, "Hey, mom, I need help with this," I'm still going to be on the phone.
You'll be
But
there.
they need to be able to do it on their own. And that will be a very important part of the process.
So do you plan to send them to high school then?
I've looked at it, and it's a funny thing. I spent a lot of my time as a homeschooler being like, oh, I hope like if they decided to go to college or they decided to go to high school that they'd be ready. And I'm just so worried that maybe they won't have all the right things and like it's such a different environment. And then so I was like, well, I'll just go tour a bunch of schools and see. And I would tour them and I would come home and I would go, they're going to be so bored. They're going to be so far ahead. And no, I don't. If they decided they wanted to go, and neither one of them has any interest in doing so right now, if they decided that was something they were really wanted, I know what schools. I know I have two schools that
Mhm.
that was part of the plan. I was like, I need to have some school options for them if they decided, so I know which schools would be reasonable fits for them. And um, but no, I'm not going to make them go unless they want to go. And the truth is that I can get them access to the best thinkers on the planet for any topic that they're interested in, or I can send them to the people down the street.
And who's down the street?
There's just whoever's down the street.
Oh.
My point just being like, it's like if
Oh, the
you
schools down the
if you
street.
have the entire country to pick from, really the world, but English speaking world because they're going to learn in English, um, the entire English speaking world, or I can have the people that happen to live, within a 10-mile radius of my house, which is most likely to give them the best opportunities. So we'll see.
So when we talk about homeschooling and education, what do you think that parents misunderstand the most about learning and child development?
If I'm talking to other homeschoolers or I'm talking to people who aren't homeschoolers?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's do both.
Okay. Um, to people that are homeschoolers, what they misunderstand the most, let's see. I'll say one that's kind of common in the circle, and that is that it's school at home. It's not really school at home. You are doing education, but the education can be so much richer, and that also that it's okay to branch out of a curriculum. So a lot of people will pick a curriculum and they feel like they have to do it exactly the way the curriculum was written and they can't do anything extra, and that if they do something extra that somehow that like they're scared to go outside of it. And like, oh,
Mhm.
what if my kid misses this or that or the other? And I always encourage it says, what is the intention of the curriculum? What is the goal of what they're trying to teach? And is there a better way for you to teach it? Right? Or is there a faster way for you to teach it? Is there a way that you can make it come more alive? And so, for example, like my kids are doing the Progymnasmata, which is a ancient Greek style exercises for learning to write. And when I look at the curriculum, if I followed it exactly the way it's written, it would be really tedious. But the essence of it is so beautiful and so good. And so I take the parts of it that are really good and I help it come alive for my kids. I also, like the curriculum says, make sure it's exactly perfect from the very beginning. And I say, I'm going to make sure it's exactly perfect by the end. And I'm going to make sure that by the time they get to the end, they can write one of these like it's easy. But the first one, the goal is just to get it there, just to write the story for it to be something that's fun and enjoyable for them.
Mhm.
And then we build to that, right? So they're still going to learn what it is they're supposed to learn, but we're not going to do it in a way that tamps them down. And the other thing we do, like I always do, is once they've mastered it, we say, now you get to make it your own. Now write your own story. Right. And so that's not in the curriculum. I'm taking it and I'm saying, now you've learned how to write a really good story. Now you know the critical elements that make a story beautiful and powerful and great, good. Now now write your own story. Because they know that's what kids really want to do. They want to write their own stories, right? But you teach them what a really good story is, you know? So I think that's the thing. I think that homeschool parents, they get wrong that they can't modify, that they can't adapt, they can't do more.
Claire, you
What
sound like an administrator talking to a teacher.
is that
That
good?
giving them yes, you're giving them the freedom to veer away from a curriculum if it's the best thing for the kids, because what matters is where you land. You don't have to do A, B, and C and D just because it's in this book. As long as they get to Z and they understand all of this, it doesn't, you don't have to stay in this rigid context to get there. You can expand out of that and have fun with your students and engage your students as long as they're learning the concept. And I had so many teachers who couldn't get past that, but it's not in the curriculum. It does it's okay.
It's
Have a
okay.
good time, have fun. So I love that you're doing that with your parents. Those are those are golden conversations to give them the freedom to break free of this book.
The book. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say for homeschool parents. For other adults, so people who don't homeschool, I think one of the biggest things that they tend to think is that homeschooling makes children's worlds smaller. And I certainly felt that. But now I recognize that it makes their world bigger. Um, because you think that it makes their world smaller because they're just with their parents and they're just with their family. And I'm not going to get into the socialization thing because, I mean, my kids are more social. Like they play with the kids in the neighborhood all the time. They have too many extracurriculars. We've already talked about that. They're just way too busy. So we get plenty of that. Um, but the way that it makes their life bigger is that is we can do so much more. It's kind of like what we just talked about. Like they're not just following the curriculum, they're getting to do more.
Mhm.
And so when we're doing history, I mentioned at the very beginning that my kids, we were doing history and I showed them the Hagia Sophia and they decided they really liked that building. And so we ended up doing this incredible deep dive of the Hagia Sophia and then got into architecture. And then all of a sudden we're learning about Frank Lloyd Wright and we're learning about, all of the, like it just like it blossomed. And we were learning about, the buttresses on the cathedrals and it just, because we could. We went to a Greek Orthodox church because Hagia Sophia used to be a Greek Orthodox church, or not Greek Orthodox church, and so they could see. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's just like the Hagia Sophia," and so their world is bigger because I have the time to make it bigger, and I can make it bigger. That's around what they are interested in. My little one has all this time to do all this origami and get really into that, or whatever they're into, they can make it bigger. And we do so many living experiences for the field trips. Like we happen to be in Arizona, and so we have access to all of these national monuments, which are ancient people's buildings, their structures and stuff. So when we were studying ancients, we went and we did all of those. We did them in person and we could like talk about all those things. And so their world is bigger academically and more enriched because we are homeschooling. And so I think that's the biggest misconception.
So I have a random question for you since you mentioned origami again. So when your daughter's doing this origami, do you tie that into geometry at all? Or is it just fun?
Well, so I wrote a post about this a while ago. One of the things I actually encouraged origami because of visual spatial working memory. So um, into your brain, math is visual and spatial.
Mhm.
So people who are savant mathematicians, they'll tell you they see the math in their head. Like they visualize the numbers. Like they literally think of, and that's actually what we're attempting to do in classrooms now, right? Like you notice that like it's all about these manipulandums and they're like, here's a block and it's 100 and here's these little pieces that are ones and these are tens. And the reason we're doing all of that is because we're trying to create that visual spatial understanding of math because that's how people who are experts in math think. And so one of my goals a while back ago, because I knew this, is to try to encourage visual spatial working memory in my kids. And so I just gave them a lot of different things, and origami was one of those things. So Is geometry specifically tied in? No, but will it make her better at geometry? Yes.
Kind of like, will music make you better at math, right? Because you have to
Yes.
learn whole notes and quarter notes and half notes and rests. And
Yes.
so
Though,
it
and
all.
actually, music is an interesting one because it also like some of the same brain regions get activated.
Hmm.
Again has to do with that visual spatial working memory, because you're training that task. You're training taking just this visual thing that's also represents spatially because there's time associated with it, right? So you have this visual, and then you're having to take that and put it into something physical. Um, so yeah, it's the same sort of thing that's working.
And that's also part of that classical education, part of that structured part of what you're doing. So if we're talking about the structure versus the freedom in the classical versus the unschooling model, so tell me, structure versus freedom. How does make the case for structure? What's helpful, what's hurtful with structure? What's helpful, what's hurtful for freedom? What give me the good and the bad and the ugly for both of these things.
So let's see. I've actually been asked several times recently, like, why is rigor important in an education? And I think that
Because
that's maybe,
we throw that word around a lot, and sometimes there's not a lot of substance behind that word.
yes, it's got to be rigorous.
Yeah.
What does that
But
mean?
what is that?
What does it mean? I would say, I think that on the structured side, why is rigor important? Rigor is important because there are sensitive time windows. If a child tries to learn to read between, I guess as young as 4 these days, but you don't have to do that. So 4 to 10, it's going to be easier than if they try to learn to read 10 plus because their brain is different. And so there's time periods where it's important that we introduce certain kinds of things. Same thing with language. The more vocabulary that a child is exposed to when they're toddlers, their brains are on fire for language. Into the fours, the fives, the sixes, sevens, it just goes down after that. If you get into your 8-year-old's memory, an 8-year-old's memory is better than a 25-year-old's memory. Which is the coolest thing. I remember when we used to do these memory games, we flip the tiles. And I remember when my 8-year-old all of a sudden got better than me. And I'm like, what happened? And then she legitimately would beat me. And I'm like, I'm trying right now. Like, I can't, she's doing better than me. It's because her memory is better than mine. I don't know if it's still, we haven't tested that in a while. But the point is that there are certain time windows that you need to give children and that they need to be exposed to things. On the other side, too, I want my child at 18 to have had as many advantages as they possibly can have so that they're sitting at the world and they can go in as many directions as they possibly can. I don't want doors to have been closed to them because I didn't give them the education they needed when they were 8 or 9 or 10, right? So rigor is important and structure is important because we want them to grow into the children that they want, that they have as many things open to them as they can be. On the other side, if you do that in a way that makes them hate it, I always say, like, if my kid can do math but hates it, I still failed, right? If they hate learning, if you teach them, if they can read but they hate reading, they can do math but they hate it. If they know, the presidents of the 50, all the presidents of the United States, but don't care to ever learn about history ever again, we failed, So if you take it too far, if you shove it down their throats, you create adults who have no interest in learning at all and will stay stagnant for the rest of their lives. On the other side, on the unschooling side, the pro, this child-directed learning, the pros are, if just what I said. Like, if you can keep that fire burning, they can learn anything forever. That they will be incredible and out there and loving the world, and that they can do more and creative things if you give them the space to do that. On the other end, the cons of that is that if you do not give them an intellectually rich environment, you will limit their opportunities and you will limit them forever. And people don't want to hear that, but it's true. And so that's why it's important to marry. You want to take the pluses of both sides. You want them to have as many doors open as possible. You want them to live in that rich, wonderful world, but you also want that fire of love and learning and this desire to go out and change the world and make a better place. And you want those things married together. And you want to avoid, I hate learning. or I'm not prepared for life, right? So that's it's a quadrangle.
Absolutely. So in your house, you've got all kinds of things going on. So, where has this been hard for you?
The hardest to do the marrying of both, math. It's it was I don't want to say it was it's by comparison getting them to love reading was way easier. Getting them to love
Mhm.
writing was easier. And that's I think part of it is because the path into reading is like stories. And there's so many wonderful stories and like humans have just such an innate love of story, right? And then history, you can teach history as a story and then that's really fun. You get to like learn all these different cultures and that's super fascinating. And science is like, "Oh my gosh, look at this cool thing and there's bugs and there's just all this amazing stuff," right? And writing, like they want to learn how to write their own stories and so and then, and that ties in with the literature. Math seems has definitely been the hardest one to keep that love. And I'm actually writing about this a lot right now. And I think so I'm actually gonna spend the summer trying to reignite their love of math. And because I've accomplished it in a variety of ways throughout, but it seems to keep it's something you have to kind of keep pushing on. Excuse me. And I think it's because there's the rigor of math, and you have to do the rigor of math. And sometimes it's hard to pair the rigor of math with that joy and fun.
Mhm.
And what I'm planning to do is kind of change the relationship with math and have conversations around. I'm pulling in all of these math puzzles, and I found some kind of supplementary materials that are going to bring math alive and make it be like, look, it's this beautiful thing. It's art. It's mysteries. It's a puzzle, and it's okay to. I think that's part of it. It's like when you're reading a story, you don't tend to get it wrong, so to speak. But you do a math problem, it's like you're wrong. Like it's instant, and people and the kids don't think about it. They think about it as like, oh, I'm being tested all the time, as opposed to mathematicians think about it as I'm testing the problem. Like I'm the one who's doing the testing, and oh, I could think about it this way, or I could think about it that way. There's actually more than one way to get there, and so changing that idea for them. And I also think that we need to with children and math, I think that they like when you try to encourage a kid to read, it's like, yeah, but you'll get to read stories. It's not like you'll get to and read the instructor manuals. But when we tell kids, why do you need to be able to do math? It's like, we need to be able to do your taxes, don't you? It's like, well, that's not a very compelling reason. I don't want to like no one really so it needs to be like, you want to be able to solve some of the world's most complex and fascinating problems, I think the perspective too, like I read this quote in that Lockhart book that I was mentioning earlier, and I loved it. It was something like, it's okay for it to take hours or even days for you to understand something because it originally took centuries. And I think kids need to hear that sometimes. It's okay for it to take a little time. Like it took, Archimedes a really long time, and Euclid, so I'm going to set out to change that. And I already have pieces of that, but I'm actually putting together something. And I hope I'm going to be able to give it to readers and stuff too, but that's one of the big things I've been working on with my kids. It's definitely the hardest of all the disciplines.
That was always, I was loved math in the early years, and then I I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I had the same math class 3 years in a row because that's as high as the schools went. And so by the time I got to, like, ninth grade, that's when I had a new math. I went into geometry finally, and I had to think, and I hadn't had to think for 2 years because I had
You
algebra, then
just,
I had algebra, then I had algebra,
yep.
and then suddenly I didn't, and, uh, it just that's when it all fell apart for me. So it was a really, really sad thing. I have a friend, her name is Carissa Brazil, and she is truly gifted. She's a genius. Like, she's one of those people you talk to and you're talking to her and you're having a great conversation, then she's over here. And she has made this leap, and in her brain it has made perfect sense. And you're like, "What where did we go?" And then she explains it. You're like, "Oh, well, yeah, that makes sense, but I'm not in your brain. I have no idea how you got there." And she was a math teacher and a science teacher, and she has left education, and she now has a company called Without Walls. And so
Cool.
she's Education Without Walls, and she's building like these science escape rooms, and she travels and with these escape rooms, and crazy fabulous. So I'm going to set you guys up because she had the most fun science or math classes, and children loved middle school kids who don't love anything. Middle school kids loved going to her math classes.
That's
So I
awesome.
think, and she always had projects going on and just fun ways to teach math. So I, I think you two should talk.
I would love that.
Yeah.
And if she's still teaching or if she's got someone that she likes, that would be great.
Yeah. She'll,
But yeah, I'm basically having what I want doesn't exist. So I've been doing a lot of, okay, you're learning this right now. Let me come up with a cool puzzle that you can bring that together. Yeah.
no, and that's how her brain works. I mean, like the two of you together, I can see you brainstorming and creating something like magical. So
Awesome. I would
yeah,
love that.
it would be really cool. What do you say to parents who say, I could never homeschool? I could never homeschool. This is not for me. And again, I agree with you. This name of this podcast is More Than One Way, because I too believe there's more than one way. I am a champion of classical education, although I've never worked in classical education. I've worked in traditional education and charter schools and a private school, but I believe there's something for everyone. And I like Montessori. I like them all. I think wherever you think whatever's the best fit for your child, that's where your child should go. But I also think that there are parents who would love to homeschool, but think that they can't homeschool, that they don't have it in them. And I am in a state where education has gone crazy. I'm in Colorado and things are Looney Tunes here. And there are a lot of parents who want to pull their kids out of schools. There are waiting lists in the charter schools. They can't get in the schools that they want to, but they just don't feel like they have the skills that they need to homeschool. So what would you say to those parents?
So don't let fear hold you back. Said everything you want is on the other side of fear. I believe that. It was terrifying for me to homeschool my kids. It's still scary sometimes. I have someone say, "Oh, I'm just so scared. I'm doing it all wrong," and I was like, "Yeah, that never really fully goes away." But I think the same thing is true of parenting. Don't you feel like all through parenting, if you're a parent, you're always a little scared. I mean, you probably aren't now because you got these adult children that are, functional and stuff. But the whole process, the whole way through, I think people just say, "Oh, it's really scary. I don't know what I'm doing." And I just think that that's true. You just have to decide that it's important enough to you. And if it's important enough to you, then do it. And I always also tell new homeschool parents that I just laid out this whole case about, oh, you need to merge these different things and you should just like spread out from the curriculum. Don't do that at the beginning. Just find something that you relate to. Just find something that somebody else has created that's straightforward and just start doing it. And then from there, you can learn how your kids learn. If it doesn't work, then you pivot. Says, oh, okay, this doesn't work. I'll go this other direction. And you find a mentor, find a guide, find someone that you relate to. And there's a lot of different people out there. There's so many different people that can help you and talk to you um and find people in your own community. Like I didn't know anybody in my community. And now I do. And now if I have a problem, I can reach out to somebody or we talk to people online. People online are so nice. The homeschooling group is so great. Like I'll say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you guys like? And they give suggestions. So just start. And the other thing I always say too is that you can't ruin a kid in 6 months. When we when we started it, we were like, we're going to do it for 6 months. And, if it didn't work, we'll put them back in school and they'll be okay. You were in the education. Like, I mean, you can get a little behind in 6 months, but it's not going to ruin them. Like they're okay. You can catch them up. And so just, if you want to do it, try it, dip your toe, see how it feels.
See how it
And
goes.
you can always put them back in. And a lot of homeschool parents are really terrified of high school. And it's okay to send them to school for high school. You can also just homeschool the grades you feel good about. And even if all you did is, K through 2, you gave them those couple of extra years of play and joy and fun in your backyard, that means something. And I think it's important.
And there are a lot of schools where you can send them part-time too. Like if you're
Yes.
struggling with science or math, you can send them to high school for just those couple of subjects. Or if they want to do extracurriculars because you pay taxes, they can go to school for the
Yes.
extracurriculars. That's always fun. Fine too.
I was
You
gonna say,
can do
if
that.
you are in so I don't know what else is out there in other, my state, because we had school choice, there infinite choices. There is send your kids one day. There's send your kids 2 to 3 days. There's micro schools. There's just like 20 hours a week. There are charter schools. There's just infinite choices. But almost anywhere you're going to live, there's going to be a co-op. There's going to be a group that gets together and meets and that helps you. And So take advantage of those. Find the community and get involved, and you don't have to do it all by yourself. You really don't. I know people who just started homeschooling this year, and they have their kids in online school. Their kids are older, so she's in an online school, and running ahead, and still doesn't need the 40 hours a week. And so there's just a gazillion different ways to educate children. Find the one that works for your family, and don't let fear hold you back.
No, I think that's great advice. I think that's great. My daughter did her senior year online, and then she was concurrently enrolled in the community college here, and that was a great marriage for her because she could go at her own pace, finish out her senior year, and then start her college career, which was wonderful for her. So, in your house, what does a normal day look like? Is there a normal day?
There is a normal day. In the morning, the mornings are normal. So the kids get up. We have older kids now, so they get up and they get themselves ready now while I make breakfast. I don't know how deep do you want to go. I do breakfast. I make breakfast and lunch at the same time in the morning, so I'm done with cooking for the day. And sometimes the kids help with that. And then over breakfast, we read whatever book we're reading as a family. That So right now we're doing Little Women, for example, and that's the book that
Oh,
I would say is so wonderful. Oh my gosh, reading that as an adult, I'm just like, this is so good. I was like, are you guys taking notes? Um, but the but that's the book that's kind of their literature book. That's the book that we're discussing or having conversations about, where those kinds of things, and those. Um, Anyway, so we have those. They have books that they're reading for school too, but they have a little bit more choice of those. And I pick books that they like. So that's the book we read in the morning. And then from there we do school. We call it school. And they do that's their math and their writing, and then they're reading. But typically my oldest actually does reading. She wakes up and does her school reading before she gets out of bed in the morning. That's what she likes to do, which is fine. So her writing is more extensive because, like I said, she's working on her novel, so she's always doing that, and we're going back and forth between a writing curriculum and that. And so we do that. And I kind of go back and forth. I bounce back and forth between them for math. It kind of depends on what they both want to start with math. And I'm always like, what if we traded? They don't want to do that. They like to do math first. We get math out of the way, and I go back and forth and I teach them the math, and they work on their problem sets, and then they do writing. Spelling and grammar is kind of condensed. And then we will eat lunch together. Usually I'll read history to them over lunch because we have a narrative history text, and I usually read that to them over lunch. And then in the afternoons, it depends on the afternoon. So on Mondays, right now I run a science club in my house. So I have a bunch of kids come over and we do science club for several hours. And then the last hour of that is play. On Tuesdays, they go to an extracurricular. Um, it's a campus that they go, and they during cooking and theater and art, I think. Wednesdays we do history as a family, and we're going to start. I'm going to call it Culture Club because I don't think history really captures what it is that I do. We do culture. It's not just the stories of mankind and of humankind. It's of the art and the music and the architecture and all of those
mhm.
pieces together. So I'm probably going to start one of those next year. But right now I just do that with my kids. Thursday they have piano, and Fridays they get to do more or less what they want in the afternoon. So whatever
Awesome.
cool projects they want to get into. And that will change in the fall, but that's sort of what a typical day looks like. And then Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, they go off and do dance and ninja. Those are the main things they're into right now in the evenings.
Do you do
So
any civics at all?
what do you mean by civics? Like talking about like
Like
US
US
history? Like
government and
we're doing
Declaration
that
of
next year.
Independence and
So we've
next year.
done,
Okay.
so I feel I feel that you can't understand America until you understand the context of the world history. And some people say it's really important. You should do it the other direction. You should do your place first and then go big. I think it's so important. Like in fact, so for example, like we've gone through the American Revolution, and then we've been through all like the French Revolution and all of the revolutions that happened in Central and South America and all of those different ones. And it's so stark how what happened here in the United States was so different. Everywhere else had all these revolutions and it went really poorly. And the US had a revolution and it went really well. And so they will start American history with that context. they will start American history understanding why that these colonists, what was going on in Europe, that they decided that it was worth, you know, dying, many of them, to come, like the environment that was there. And so I think, and so we will start American history with them having a really firm understanding of the context in which the American experiment began.
I think that context is so important because in our country, we focus so much on the individual and then we build out and then we don't understand the out. And I think taking the out and building in so that you understand all of the things that happened, I think that's a really important context. So I appreciate
Yeah.
what you're doing in your home. I think that's pretty awesome.
I also
And if
wanted
you
them
were
to read
doing
the
it the
Constitution.
opposite, that would be okay too. I would
Yeah.
not
No,
criticize.
I
I
get,
would not
yes.
criticize, but I do think that that context is important because we get stuck on rigid little things without understanding the big picture and zooming out. And sometimes zooming out is really important. Do your kids ever resist? They ever I don't want to do that today, mom?
Sure. Um, Mostly never, that never happens with history. It never happens with science. It never
Wow.
happens with reading books. It does happen with math. But not puzzle math day. When it's puzzle math day, it's like, oh, can we do that one again? Can we do puzzle
I
math day?
like puzzle
So I'm
math.
trying to figure out a way to do that. But so math, sometimes I'll get that. However, they don't like taking too many days off because they have already recognized that if they take too many days off, like we took a month off last year for a summer, right? And which was fine. And then they came back, they're like, don't remember it, I don't like this. And it was just like, and they literally, my oldest is like, never let me take that many days off ever again. And I was like, okay. So yes, but they also don't, we have conversations about, why don't you want to do it? Are you feeling tired today? What if we did less today? How should we? So I try to spin it into this kind of work-life balance sort of thing. Like,
Hmm.
did you have a really busy weekend? Like, what do you want to do less today? We'll do more tomorrow. Do you want to do, like, because it's about the spectrum, right? And they're ahead, so we can have conversations about that.
Very good. Well, you got some well-adjusted kids there, Claire. Maybe it's because you're home all the time.
With them all the time. They weren't well adjusted when they came home from daycare. They were not. So
No.
we worked really hard at that.
What did that look like?
Um, They were wild. They had no capacity to calm themselves. You know, it felt like they felt unsafe. They weren't able to settle. They felt uncomfortable all the time. Like my oldest rather, she was having a lot of emotional outbursts, slamming doors, all these kind of things that, lots of kids do, but like on a level that was intense. And once they came home from school, from daycare, um, that softened. And she started playing more and kind of being present more and would come sit in my lap more. And in a way that, and it was just kind of like, oh, wow, like this is, she should have been doing this all the time and she wasn't. And then it took us a lot of, a while after that to kind of, I think it was an attachment issue. I think that they felt they weren't really attached to us. I mean, yes, they were, like how every kid is like attached to their parents, but it wasn't the
Right.
same, not the way that they talk about, just that if they get upset that they 100% come to me for being consoled and stuff.
Mhm.
They really, when they came home, it didn't have that, and it didn't feel solid, and it didn't feel sturdy. And over the years, they definitely developed that. And from that foundation, then they can go be more out there. My youngest is always like talking up a storm to everybody, and, all of her coaches and stuff. Like, she'll just have like 20-minute long conversations with I'm there, like watching her have these conversations with adults. It's just da, 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 da. Like, so, um, but they weren't like that when they came home, and they were definitely, I don't know if we want to get into a daycare debate, but, I don't say what is right or wrong for other people, but daycare harmed my children.
Yeah, it's hard because people have to work. We live in
Yeah.
a society, sadly, where we've set things up where people have to work. It's difficult to have oftentimes a parent stay home. Um, s- and that's a reality
Yep.
in our
I,
culture.
Again, like, there's no
Mm.
judgments for me. I did it.
Yep.
So, I can just say what is true
Yeah.
for my family and my
Yeah.
children. And I
Yeah.
will not, there's no judgments from me what people make decisions. There's other people online that just make these like just these incredibly statements, and I'm just like, how do you feel 100% confident in anything like that? Like
Well,
there's
it's
not
not you can't judge what somebody else is doing in their home because you don't know what's happening in that home and you don't know
right.
what the situation is, you know what the like and to assume that you know anything about anyone is insanity. But if there's any way that we can make things better, if there's a neighbor, or if there's a grandma, if there's something where we can kind of make sorry. I
It's
get
all
a
good.
little emotional sometimes, but I'm Italian. I talk with my hands, and this microphone here makes it very difficult for
I
me.
do too. I have to when we're here. I'm like, let me put my hands up near my face.
Like hit this thing all the time. Like, stop it. But but it would be nice if we could figure out a way in this world where our parents, our mothers could stay home with the children. I think
Yeah.
it's important for moms to stay home. It's important for a parent to stay home, whether it's a mom or a dad, but innately in the way we're programmed and the way we're built. And I'm sorry if I'm not sorry. I don't want to offend anyone, but that's just the DNA. The DNA is dad protects mom, mom
Evolution
protects
didn't
kids. That's how the species survives. That's
evolution didn't skip you.
Yep, that's just how the world works. So
I'm with you. We agree.
that's just but that's science. That's just science.
Yes.
But if we could figure out a way in our country to reward parents for staying home with kids, one parent staying home with the child, whomever that parent is, it would it would be a wonderful thing for our children. Our children would grow up more secure. They would grow up learning. They would grow up not being raised by the state, which would
Yep.
be a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I'm a huge proponent of that. However, I'm not going to judge anyone for doing what they have to do to
Gotta do what you gotta do.
survive. But if we could make that work, that would be a beautiful thing.
I think that's you were talking about environment at some point, and I think that's a large part of it. We used to, it used to be possible, and a lot of
Mhm.
women could make the choice to stay home. It wasn't always true for everybody. The poor have always had to have two working households. Um, but there was more parents that could stay home, and there was more mothers that they were able to they had the time to read to their kids because they
Mhm.
were home with them, and then those kids would go off into the school, and then it would kind of act to help everybody else because they had it, and so they were able to pass it on in that way. And I think we've got a lot of what's wrong is parents can't be there.
No. And I think also that we've got in our culture a lot of women turning on women. And I think that's an issue as well. We can't turn on each other. Whatever a woman decides to do is her choice. And if a woman decides to stay home with her children, and that is absolutely fine. And if a woman decides to go into the workforce, that is fine too. That is her choice. And I don't think that we should ding women for either of those choices. I have friends who went back to work after they had their children. That is their choice. I chose to stay home with my child. That is my choice. I did not judge my friend. My friend did not judge me. But we have other women out in the world who judge, and we need to stop tearing each other down and we need to build each other up. In
Sounds
my humble opinion.
sounds good to me.
Yeah. But if we could make it work where we could stay home for those formative years and be there, I think that would help our kids an
I
awful
like
lot.
Erica Komisar on that. And I know she can be polarizing because she tends to be a little bit more on the judgmental side, but she says that, women can have it all, just not necessarily at the same time.
That was a quote in 30 something. Did you ever watch 30 something?
I don't know. Probably not.
That oh, it
We
was
don't
a
have the
show.
TV. So.
It was a show well, it was in the 90s. So this was
Okay.
way
Yeah.
way before. This was the 90s and it was a show about 30 somethings and it was Faith and Michael, Hope and Michael. And they were kind of the protagonists of this show. And she had just had a baby and she went back to work and it just wasn't working out. And she's like, I thought I could have it all. And he said, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. And didn't have children. I was just either engaged or newly married. I was in my 20s and that stuck with me forever. It's like, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Have to phase it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had an early career that ended very early because I had children young. My first baby was born when I was 25 years old, and I did not go back to work until my early 40s. So my real career did not start until
Till later.
much later. And that's okay. I'm having a great time.
There's a woman down the street. Our kids are really good friends, and that's why we know each other. We're the same age, but she had her children young. I had my children older. And so I had this kind of, I had my career early. And then I, quit to homeschool. And yeah, I do this on the side, but it's in my job. When people ask me, like, my job is homeschooling my kids. That is my number
Mhm.
one. This is this thing that I do on the side. But her, all of her, most of her kids are kind of out of the house already. And so she went back, she waited till her youngest was in the second grade or third grade. And then she went to school to become a nurse practitioner. And so now she's having her career, but her kids are in school, So she did, and she went. Some of them she was home all the way through, all the way when they went to college and things, and so it's like we kind of have these opposite effects with the same age. There's lots of different ways to live a life.
There really is, and they're all okay as long as
Yes,
we're
and she's very satisfied with. She's glad she made that choice. I'm glad I made the choice I made. So I mean, if that's the big thing for me is I want women to make the choice because they made the choice, not because someone else told them they had to do something, right? Like I think a
Mhm.
lot of women feel like they have to work because people are tell them that they have to and that that's where they're going to find their meaning. And that's fine if that's true for them. I just don't want them to do it because someone else told them that's where their meaning is, right? I want them to decide for themselves. Well, look at your life. And for me, it was like it was taking away, and I'm glad that I am home with my kids, and
Mhm.
it is where my meaning is with my children. That's okay for it's not for like, I told you the woman down the street, like she's gone, like her kids, she's not homeschooling her kids. She was there with them at the beginning and now she's like, they don't need me as much. So I'm gonna go find some meaning out in the world. I'm gonna start taking I took care of a bunch of little kids. Now I'm gonna go take care of and she works in the pediatrics. So like she's still helping children. She's just helping more children. And I love that for her, and so she's very satisfied with that. There's lots of different ways to live a life. Find the one that you want and that is fits you,
Right, you find your purpose,
your purpose and your
and as
meaning.
long as you're happy and your world is settled and your children are happy and everything's good, then yay you. I just don't think we should be nearly as judgmental, and I think there's so much anger and so much screaming right now in the world, and I don't think there has to be. I think if we could sit down and just talk to each other face to face and have conversation, we can find some middle ground. I think we have much more in common than we don't. And if we could just
Agree.
put away the things that we don't agree on and focus on the things we do, we get to know each other, we have conversations, and then we can find solutions to problems. I don't think it's that hard. I just think we get dug into our side, and maybe we should not do that. Maybe we should just talk to each other. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Humans are very tribal and it's hard to get them out of that. But I agree
Yeah.
with you. I agree with you.
We are very tribal.
It's built into our DNA, so to
I
speak.
see. It's like that
It's what made you safe.
that husband, mother, child.
It's what made you safe, and you have to be part of your group. And but we just our group. We just have to start thinking of our group as being larger than it
Hmm.
is.
We
And
need
it's
some
also
peace treaties. We need to smoke the peace pipe with people. So we need to get some peace treaties.
sounds good.
If you could ask a parent to change one thing that really, really mattered tomorrow, what would that one thing be?
I know what I want to say and have to come up with the best way to say it. There's two, but they're kind of around the same idea. It's treat your child with respect. There's a gentleman, he did nonviolent communication. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Um, Marshall Rosenberg, and he did this experiment where it's not really it wasn't an official experiment, but he had two sets of people and they had to deal with this. He asked them, so your neighbor has left out their garbage can and it's been driving you crazy, and you need to go and talk to them and deal with that. What How do you do that? And he would have them write it all down. And then they would come back and they would go and they would have another group had done the same task. And they would look what they were saying. They're like, wow, you were really rough on your neighbor. Like, you're just telling them they're being such a bad person or whatever. And like, we were just kind of asking nicely. And what he had changed is that the other one was telling their son. Their son had left out the garbage can. And he was just saying, look how you talk to children. You should at least treat them as nicely as you treat your neighbor. At least, right? I think if you could treat children with respect, that they are beginners, they're not dumb, they are worthy of your kindness. And the way I see people talk to children sometimes is just it's just terrible. And it goes for, parents, it goes for I see parents do it, I see, teachers do it, unfortunately, I see it's just the way adults treat children. And if you could just change that, just treat them with respect. It doesn't mean that you get to they don't have to walk all over you. Some people are like, "Oh, you're just going to let them like leave out their dishes." My kids don't leave out their dishes. We have conversations, but I don't yell at them. I don't tell them they're terrible human beings because they did it. I don't, right? We just say, "Hey, it would be really helpful. Would you be willing to do that for me? Would you
Uh-huh.
be willing to be a part of the family and help with that?" Treat them with respect. Anyway.
Somebody needs to follow you around with a camera all day.
Not perfect, but then we get to model how to apologize. So that's actually
That's
been
true.
why it's been my kids. It's just now happened. Like they used to get in fights, and I would have to we have to have conversations about our fights and how do we resolve our fights. And it's just started happening. Like recently, like all of a sudden they're like, I'm not angry at you per se, but I'm angry. I'm just like,
I'm
I
just
wish you
angry at
hadn't
the
said it
situation, Mom.
like that. No, with each other, the children,
Oh,
like they're pretty good with me, like, but like they don't. I mean, it's not that they've certainly. Oh my gosh, hormones, so they yell sometimes, and it's okay, but they when they get in fights with each other, they're starting to manage that better. It does not every time, but it only starts with one or two times, and I just love hearing them say, I'm feeling really angry right now, and I'm gonna leave. And I'm like, yes, good job. You should walk away. So anyway,
I used to do that with my kids. I would say, "Mommy needs a timeout,"
I've definitely done that.
and I would put myself in my room, and they would be, they were so cute.
Yeah, yes. There's this old saying that's like, if you don't have something nice, don't say anything at all. And I had recently, I was like, you know what? The best way to say it is to kids, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And like, that's really better. And it didn't matter so much when they were little, but like this zone right now where they'll just get angry and just say mean things to each other. And I'm like, no, just if you can't say something nice, walk away. And that goes for mama too. If mama's having a hard time, mama needs a timeout.
Hmm.
Going in the, you know, nobody's
Just like,
perfect.
we
Nobody's
would say
perfect.
break. I need a break.
I need a break.
And then my daughter would look at me. I remember her being 3. "Mommy, I need a break." She would just go to her room.
They do what you do.
You
They
go.
will do,
You take
and
that break.
they're really good at apologizing because mama's had to apologize, but no one is perfect. No one's perfect.
No,
And
no
no
one is.
homeschool is perfect. I mean, I know Instagram makes it look really like we're just like sitting in our Sunday best dresses down by the river doing our math
With
homework.
the sunshine and our hair
With the sun,
flowing,
my hair is
with our
perfectly
perfect
done.
skin and our perfect teeth.
Yeah, like I cut my hair short because I wasn't because I was just never doing it. It was just always in a ponytail, and I was like, I can't have my hair only in a ponytail all the time. So
I
anyway,
live in a ponytail. I have no hair. You can see how thin? It's just
I
so
have very
thin.
thin hair too. Yeah,
I have very thin hair, so it's
same.
just always in a ponytail. It gets
It's a thing.
long, it's thin, it's short, it's thin. It doesn't matter. It's
Yes.
just thin. So you're in your house. It sounds to me, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like one of the big principles that guides your home is respect.
Yes,
So
I
what
think
are
that is
some
true.
other principles that guide your home?
Family first. That's what we say as our family motto. Um, Family first is the big one. It's like we put the kids first, we put our family first. Like even when we're thinking about like activities, it's like I said, my kids in this dance competition, we kind of are stuck with that for a little bit longer. But the conversation we had with her was like, this doesn't put our family first. Like we're having to spend all of our time just with yours, and you have a sister, and we have family needs, and so, family comes first. And I think we live that value out in the way that we manage technology in our households, or phones get put away, where we're not constantly on, internet. We don't, we try to have family game nights and family times. My husband works from home, he refinagled the stuff so he could work from home. I quit my job to be at home, so I think family first is one of the big ones. Some of the other ones are education. Like we've actually done the process of sitting out and talking about our values. Education's a big value for us. Health is a value for us. Trying to make sure we eat the way we eat. I cook most of our meals. We buy the organic food and all those kinds of things. Trying to exercise. The reason the kids are doing dance and ninja is because we say it's important that you're learning to move your body and you're moving it in healthy ways, and exploring that. So a lot of those, service is one of the ones we're working on. Don't think we do that one well enough yet, but we think it's very important. And when the kids were little, it's really hard to get too much service, but they're getting to the ages where we can do more service with them, and that's I would say that's one of the big ones that we're trying to work on.
Very good. Well, where can people find you, Claire, if they've got questions for you or they want to reach out and get over their fear of homeschooling, or if they're stuck somewhere, they're stuck in like, I don't know what to do with this math. Where do they find you?
The best place to find me is on my website, which is clarified.life.
And clarified, like clarified ed, right? Big ED.
Clarified, yes. But you can just
I'll
type in
put it in.
clarified.life, like to spell it the way it is, and you'll find me. I'm also on X predominantly with it's at hippie mom dot sorry, it's at hippie mom PhD, which is that's again that combination between rigor and play. So if you want to find me there too, that's I spend most of my time on Substack these days, which is the clarified.life, and that's where I do my long essays and all of those kinds of things. But if you're an X person and you want those pithy little, like, if you want to see a cute picture of my kids elephant origami, that's where you're going to find that.
I saw the Triceratops on
Oh, the
Substack.
Triceratops, yes.
I did find the Triceratops on Substack. I love Substack. That's where I've got this
It's
stuff
a
on all
different
the things, but
community. And that's also where everybody sits and talks and gives good feedback. And I will say that the community there, I find very rich and rewarding. Like, there's lots of wonderful homeschool parents there, and a lot of moms that are just really interested in raising great kids. So
raising great kids. Well, I've really enjoyed getting to know you and to talk to you more. So if you guys have any questions, wherever this is posted, just drop them in the comments. I'm going to tag Claire on this so she'll see the questions, or you can reach out to her on her website and I will give you Carissa's information.
that'd be
Thanks
great.
everybody who tuned in. My audience is this big, but maybe it will grow and we will have
Be great.
more people listening to you, because this was great. So we're going to wave, but don't go anywhere because I want to talk to you a little bit more.
I know the deal.
Okay.
All right. Bye, Dee Dee. Thank you.
Everybody.
It was an honor to get to know you better and an honor to talk. We talked about some really cool things today. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.